Slanjava, welcome to Whisky and Synths. This is the #1 channel that blends whiskey drinking and music making. My name's Dave, and you have just found your whiskey-fueled music production life coach. So in today's episode, it's a special one because my brother James and I are re-releasing an album from 15 years ago. It's remastered by James. It's got a remix EP coming with it, and it's today's episode. Our best buddy Freddie, who's an amazing host, is gonna read an interview asking James and me to tell the story about how we made the album, how we gigged it, and what it was like back then, what it was like making music back then, and our attitudes, and how looking back on it has helped inform where we want to go with our music now. So hopefully in this story, you'll get to find out some useful tips and tricks and inspiration for your own project. So hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Whisky.
Hello everybody and welcome to a very special interview with James and David Maitland, two brothers who formerly created music as collective friends and currently as last of the three. It's a very special occasion for both of these lads today, as it's the 15-year anniversary of the release of their first ever album as Kinetic Friends, titled 21. I'm joined with them today for a reminisce, a dissection, maybe a walk down memory lane to celebrate their first album and to accompany its re-release and new remix EP. Guys, how are you?
Really good, thanks. Yeah,
good.
Freddie, cheers. Slanja, thanks for
cheers.
Joining us. Hey, yes. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Whiskey and Synths. So here's the whiskey.
So thanks for stepping in as kind of interview host today. So it's fun to be on the other end of it. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
James, how are you doing?
You guys to start having a think.
Yeah, fine here. Excited to be here.
Sweet.
Quite
absolutely.
Looking forward to reminisce.
Yeah.
Yes. So in terms of reminisce and where you were and where you are now. So with 15 years of distance from this album, has the way you feel about it changed in that 15 years?
Do you want to go first, James? Or
it was really good doing the remasters and getting back into it, and I suppose you kind of sort of re-examine the whole thing when you're doing the remasters because you're trying to make it sound better than it was to a certain degree. So it was nice managing to get a bit more clarity through it and hearing little bits of music and things from the different instruments that you forgot about.
Was there any tracks that perhaps needed a bit more work than the others?
I suppose the earlier stuff more than the latter stuff, but that's just a case of when Dave and I were recording it, you just sort of learn the program and how you do the recording. So yeah.
Back then we had basically didn't know, we just was plugging straight into mini jack mic input on this desktop computer. So I'm actually amazed that James done all the remastering, he took charge of that, so absolutely amazed at the results, so thanks to James for that. I feel like I also can't believe it's 15 years, but I think I kind of feel, if I look back on it, the perspective that's changed for me is lyrically, and I think some of it I get, but it's a total time capsule for me. I was it's a different person then almost, or not, or a different version of me back then. But musically, I felt it's actually informed me in where I should be going with projects in the future with James and other people and stuff like that. It's actually got me back to thinking more melodic, and I actually think more innovative in arrangements is what I wanted to do, or we wanted to do with the Kinetic Friends stuff, and it's made me think, I want to get back to that kind of thing.
Nice one. Do you think there's any standout tracks for you, David?
Probably there's two. I think Swirling Colors, because I like the arrangement, and actually they're my favorite lyrics and the keyboard parts and stuff. But Stars is probably my favorite because it's probably the most musically accomplished, and I think as a sort of I mean, to play it's quite kind of hard, and also it had that standout solo from James, like just like nuts. Yeah,
I think Stars was my standout track on this album as well, which was it was a pleasure to listen to as well. It was great, just so fun seeing you have such fun on stage. I think David more than James is having loads of fun up there, at least visibly.
Definitely visibly.
Yeah.
Were you internally though, James?
Oh, definitely internally.
He was like the cool one, basically.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah.
I think the footage we have from the Oban gig, I think we're all, me, you, and we had Mike, our friend Mike on drums, were all quite visibly in that gig, having a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was the Ox Jam stuff, I think, the footage I saw, and it's David absolutely, pumping his fist at every possible break there is to pump a fist.
Yeah, I was trying to do a bit of like Gary Newman throwing some shapes in that. But I love that gig actually was only once, I want to say, Mike played the full gig with us. I want to say he played bits of gigs with us, and it was all pretty not super rehearsed, and the way we've done it, it's pretty normal now for a lot of like experimental and pop bands to have like more backing tracks these days, but it wasn't quite as big a thing back then. But we had backing tracks, we played the hardest parts, and then Mike drummed over it, but there was no headphones, no click tracks. So I think it was like drifting in and out of sync, and we were just like having fun, like kind of going for it. It was I did enjoy that sort of freedom actually.
Tell me about the Ox Jam gigs, David. How did you get into that sort of festival?
Oh man, so I think like back then everyone read Enemy, or a lot of people did, for their music news, and there was an advert, Ox Jam put on gigs, raises money for charity, and I thought, oh, that sounds cool, because then it takes away the financial pressure of having to make money at a gig to even break even, because quite often the venue gives you hire for free when it's for charity. And I thought that'd be cool, and then I didn't do it, and I waited a year, and I was like, why did I do that? And then I remember like being like, I worked in an office at a time, which is kind of lucky because Franz Ferdinand, my favorite band, they dress kind of smart anyway. So I had that like smart vibe. I went down to the club to book it, and it was just the easiest thing. And I'm like, fuck, I'm actually doing this. And it was a total lesson in just like doing stuff, like, or some people might call it taking action, or like, just like making shit happen is way easier than you think. You just have to get over a few mental roadblocks really more than anything else. And like I felt nervous going into book that. I'd never booked a venue in my life. I didn't know anyone that had actually myself. And then I thought, okay, but you had the support of Oxfam with like a pack and a guide. They've posted that out to you. And that's how we got into putting on gigs in Fort William, our hometown, which is, if people don't know, that's like pretty small town in the Highlands of Scotland. And so there wasn't loads going on, a bit going on, but it was nice to be like add to that and try and have regular stuff on the go.
Would you say there was a standout gig from that time, David?
Yeah, actually, James, what would you agree? The Halloween one was probably the standout one.
Yeah, I'd say that was the standout one.
What's your memories of that then?
Just you dressed as Indie Santa.
I've seen a couple of pictures from that, yeah.
The one where you're like flipping your head.
It was Christmas
beers up in the air.
Oh yeah, so basically I didn't know what to go as, and I thought I can find this wig in like a shop, and I was like, and it had like, it was a bit of a cop out really, because it wasn't really an outfit. I had red skinny jeans anyway and a red t-shirt anyway. I was like, I'll just feel like the indie Santa Claus.
Yeah, I mean, you could throw on the beard and hat now, and it would almost work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, and then I think some of the best photos are from that gig as well. But I just remember being at one side of the venue, which wasn't massive really, but it was so packed. I think we oversold it. Fuck it. I don't know, it was just like
every time. And
I'd never seen a Halloween party that many people in my life who really went for it costume wise. So it was like kind of trippy. And it was like packed. And I remember at the bar, I was like, I'll walk over to the door to see how there was people helping us on the door and that. And I remember I sort of looked at my watch, and by the time it took 30 minutes to get across this like basically tiny venue. It was that busy. It was like so crazy and cruel.
Jeez. So James, do you think there's a big change to how your music is live and how your music is on the album 21?
I don't think there was really, because we'd limited it to just the two of us on stage. Like David said earlier, we were using quite a lot of backing tracks and kind of trying to play the hardest parts of the songs on stage ourselves. So we're swapping instruments. I'm on the bass near the start of the gig, and then it's passed to Dave later, and then I'm on the synths where he was in the synths earlier. So but I think sound-wise, it's probably a little bit looser just with the nature of gigs, but I think we kept it pretty tight to how it was in the album.
On the back of, I noticed on the back of the album, the credits for who's playing what, there's a lot of overlap between you two on the instrument. So how would you say, what determines who's playing what at any one point?
Whatever Dave was comfortable with playing. And I just filled the gaps.
Yeah, which probably shows that I'm less of a skilled musician than James, because he could pretty much play any part.
So you think that's what determines who takes charge at any one point, or is it always James taking charge and David sort of?
Well, I think like generally, I can't play guitar, but we can both play bass and both play keyboards. I generally stuck to bass and keyboards, and James played a lot of guitar and keyboards and bass. So it sort of depended. I think sometimes if one person had more of a singing part that was tricky, maybe the other person might jump on board to cover the instruments in that bit. Or we tried to it was like never like a really spoken thing. We just decided all this worked based on our skills, I guess. But yeah, I would say the fact that it had been more deliberate what I played probably shows that I was less skilled and needed James's help more. So just like a little bit on how we interpreted it live, Freddie, as well, is like James and I mentioned, we played a lot to backing tracks and sometimes added little ad libs and stuff around that. But I think what was fun is sometimes we had a song at the start or the end, or sometimes in the middle where we got like our friend Mike on drums to play, or sometimes other musicians like our mate Craig or Jonathan or Sean as well. And we had like a riff and we just jam it out for almost like 10 minutes, and it was like almost the exact opposite, which was a lot of fun doing that as well. So that's actually the secret track on the album, is a little bit like that as well. So,
I noticed the secret track.
Yeah, so that sort of song or piece is called Inspired, and it's kind of about that. And I remember being, it sounds dead wanky and I never do anything like this anymore. I remember being to everyone like, guys, just think of something that inspires you, or a person or event. Keep that in mind as you play, and we improvise. And like, it was kind of cute thinking back to that.
What were you thinking about then?
I'm not sure. James?
No, James, yeah?
I don't know either.
Yeah,
no,
probably like a girl I fancied at the time, if I'm honest. I was a young guy.
We used to do that in the middle of the Aux Jam gigs and have what Dave dubbed the Jam Sandwich Band, where we got as many people from the different bands that were playing that night on stage at the one time, and usually me or Dave would start a riff and just do that, just jam the whole thing and let everyone take a sort of turn doing solos and stuff.
There's like photos of that, and it's just like
it's insane.
More people on stage. People with percussion. There's just a photo of me. All I had is a cowbell. Like, whoa! And then I remember looking around, and as it continued, the drummers changed seat and they didn't drop a beat, and it was like, oh, this is sick. It was so. And I felt like the Aux Jams had this like pure sense of playfulness and freedom, and like it was kind of like we tried to make it as good as we could, but we weren't scared of doing shit like that could go totally wrong, and it wasn't perfect, but it was kind of like fun, and I like love stuff like that. I feel like it's sometimes things like that make an event memorable, even though it's not like the most professional part, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think we made the atmosphere really good for all the other bands too. But like we were we were probably stressed up to the point where the doors opened right enough. But like after that, we just sort of relaxed into the night and had a good time. Yeah. Up to the point where we'd made another mini band comprising of me and David again to be the opener of every night, because we'd opened gigs before and hated it because there's no one there, no one had enough to drink to enjoy themselves yet. So me and Dave came up with a band called Electro Bear, where I'd come up with a bunch of riffs on the acoustic guitar, and Dave just like made up some lyrics about space and Timothy Treadwell and did solos on the K-oscillator synthesizer and stuff to open the night. And it was great because like all the only people that were there at that time were the other bands, and they just sort of sat on the floor in front of the stage while we played this acoustic stuff to them.
The ironic thing is we like spent like at least a year and a half making this Kinetic Friends album, and you spent all this time remastering it, but the truth is people probably would rather the Electro Bear recordings, which we recorded in like 2 seconds, one take. Like the truth is they probably rather Electro Bear to like that.
Oh man, the power of Electro Bear and the jam sandwich.
Yeah.
So David was talking earlier a bit about that first mental barrier of actually going and signing up for the gig. James, what would you say were your mental barriers you had to overcome to make this album, if any?
Probably performing live was more of a leap. We'd been in another band before that, but we hadn't done anything where like David had organized something and we were sort of the face of it. So I think like being the headline was probably the most nerve-wracking thing. And on the recording side of things, I kind of had it easy because David did most of the writing. Even the guitar solos, he tended to write stuff on the synthesizer and then I'd interpret it for the guitar. So on the writing side, I think for me, the gigging was a little bit more nerve-wracking.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, like, because at the end of the day, like, not when the album came out, but when we were first starting it and playing shows and working on the album, am I right in saying you were still in school, James? And when you're in school, there's almost like more of like a social magnifying glass on everything, where I was just this random dude kicking about Fort William. Like, so maybe like the pressure felt more because you felt like more eyes on you in a way, where I was like, I felt nervous about stuff breaking at the gig. Like,
I probably
like
did.
Cables and batteries dying, because we hadn't done much of that. And that was, if that fails, like, how do we do the gigs? We had a lot of like, just like, it wasn't even expensive stuff, but just like cheap effects pedals, cheap keyboards, loads of stuff connected up. So I was nervous about that. Like I said, it took me a year to work up the courage to book the gig myself and stuff. But making the album wise, I think was something we both really wanted to do. Like, it was like, we finally got a computer with some recording software on it. Let's just do it. And it was fun working that way, where, we'd write a part and then James would reinterpret it in his own way and stuff like that. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. That's how we co-wrote it, or a lot of it. So James, do you remember how we actually recorded Resolution, the one you pretty much made? Like,
yes, I do. I'd come up with the acoustic guitar riff, and then we plugged in the microphone, hit record, and I sat there playing the same riff over and over again for 10 minutes, I think, because we had no idea what we were going to do with it. So it was just to try and get as much of it in as possible as like one straight take.
I just remember like lying in the bed, like doing nothing basically, like, because it was just like we had a single bedroom each and our mum and dad, so I was just chilling. And then I remember, then you had like other parts doing that as well. Like, I just remember that one being cool. And then it sort of became, I think the hardest part was at the end. I just saved up and bought like my first proper synth. It's like a micro Korg, which were cheap but good at the time, and I had an arpeggiator setting in it. And I remember like trying to get that, I think at the end of the song maybe, but in time what we'd already had was like quite tricky. But it was a lot of fun writing that one.
So James, you say you were still in education at the time. So David, what was happening in your life at this time?
I was just like working at BT, this like office in Fort William for BT. It was all right. It was like kind of, they didn't call it a project manager, like, but it was basically doing little bits of that kind of thing, and business to business stuff. And it was pretty boring, to be honest. It was all right. But I heard there was this music club on So I volunteered for that and ended up being like a part-time youth worker for that and being involved in the music aspects. And that was really good for meeting other musicians. And then I think, to be honest, if it wasn't for Ox Jam and doing all that gigs and stuff and like the stuff with James and Kinetic Friends, that, you know, looking back on it, would I have left Fort William a bit earlier? Because to be honest, I was getting a bit fed off of my job and doing it 3 years by the time this album came out. So I was like, maybe, well, you know, I would have done something different. But I think what kept me in Fort William a bit longer was doing the gigs. We had so much fun and taking it across the Highlands to like Oban, and we went to other places like sometimes for gigs, but sometimes just to try and promote Ox Jam a bit more to like Skye and Inverness and other places. So, but Oban was the main one we did gigs at. But we played Glasgow once as well, which was cool. That was a big deal for us.
It was, yeah.
Man, I remember like we turned up, it's Barfly, and they were like a chain of quite good venues across the UK. I remember turning up and I was like, look, there's a bridge opposite, a really nice bridge, red and white metal one in Glasgow. And I remember looking at it and be like, that's the bridge Zane Lowe interviewed the Strokes at. And they played here. And I was like, fuck, dude, we're playing like, not that we were big at all. And we'd never compare ourselves to the Strokes. Absolutely like fans of the Strokes. Like, but just to play the same stage they'd played like a year ago or something was like, dude, like, so that was quite cool. I think, yeah, that was like a special one, that one, yeah.
Do you think that, something I was wondering, do you think your dynamic as brothers affects your dynamic as musicians? Do you think there's more squabbling, you know, like crying to mum about David not letting on the synthesizer?
I think quite the opposite. It was quite a good, to use a wanky word, synergy between the two of us. We're good at playing off of each other quite well. So if one of us does something weird on the synth or the guitar or the bass, then the other one usually appreciates that and does something in return.
Yeah, well, it works for Boards of Canada, works for Orbital.
Yeah, I feel like I probably was maybe too bossy at the time, or too like I had too much of a vision that I could have like even been more collaborative with James, because like you said, we did work together on tracks, but I could have made it even more of that, to be honest. Looking back on it. So, but yeah, you live and learn. But overall, I agree with James. I feel like we totally used, you know, we kind of where our skills lay with James playing guitar. Such a great musician, could play anything by ear, still can, just hears it, plays it. And I'm not like that. I'm more like I need to rehearse loads and like just practice my parts. I can't just hear something and play it. Basically, I need to properly learn it. So we work together like that. And sometimes it was good actually. If we've got a show and I'm like, oh, this is the tune, I can't remember what I recorded, James would just listen to it, like, you play this part. Like,
yeah, that did happen a few times.
I just started off, so I couldn't even remember what I'd recorded.
Good Lord. Do you think, James, were your inspirations at the time? What were you drawing from?
Oh, our dad got us into a lot of prog. So like Pink Floyd, Genesis, that were the two main ones. I think we definitely loved that kind of prog rock that was more musical and melodic. I think we definitely pulled on that quite a lot. But also it was what we were talking, Dave, like 2004 into 2005, maybe 2006. Like the indie guitar scene at the time was getting huge by that point with the Strokes and Franz Ferdinand and everyone. So there was definitely influences from that side of things too.
Yeah, because I learned keyboards in school and always wanted to be in a band, but no one would like have a keyboard player in their band, so I got a bass to sneak a keyboard player into the band. Because especially before the indie sort of thing was just new metal and punk and metal. And so my aim was always I want to have keyboards in a band with guitars. And luckily at the time there was a lot of inspiring stuff like that going on, like LCD Sound System, Klaxons and the whole new rave thing. A big band were like that I liked. They were well known, but you know, they made one album, that's it, called Late of the Pier, and like they had such crazy arrangements. It felt like you were sometimes listening to 5 songs at once. And I loved that, and like I want to do more stuff like that still. I feel like I moved away from that. I want to come back to that a little bit more. And I was like, that was so cool. That kind of the sort of indie synth mashup world was a big influence at the time as well.
You guys are both still making music, so are these inspirations you've held on to, or have you dropped some old ones and picked up some new ones, would you say?
I think when I was learning more music production and Ableton and that, I definitely leaned way more into the electronic side of things with like keyboard, like just loops and keyboards and sequencers, and I love all that. And I made stuff as Hostel Freaks. But then I was actually for a while in a duo in Edinburgh called Gunge. That's the poster there, where it's just like heavy bass through pedals and a bit of synth. And my mate Eric played drums. That was cool, actually. So what I want to do is like going forward, James and I are going to be working on Last of the Free, which is like our project that combines like archive interviews, Celtic and traditional music with cutting edge electronic, but definitely when we play live, especially have like more bass and guitar parts in it, and have that blend and not always be like a dance music arrangement. I felt like I fell into that, and it's cool like making music for clubs. Quite often it has a certain kind of arrangement where it builds and drops and flows, but I'd quite like to have arrangements that are a bit more challenging than that now, where suddenly part two of the song sounds like it's the same song, but like what just happened? Like I kind of want more big moments like that. What about you, James? That's kind of what I would like to do anyway.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I want to do going forward. Get back to that. I think as Camshackle, I've come away from guitars and sort of gone head first into synths and MIDI using Ableton. But I think musically, I've still sort of stuck with chord progressions and melodies. I haven't never quite got into the electronic like dance music side of synthesizers. I've tried to use them as maybe unintentionally, but tried to use them for like similar kind of music in a way, I guess.
Whisky.